Welcome back to another episode of the Ace Talks podcast, where we talk about Ecuador and a little more. And today, we're actually going to talk about a little more. And in order to start this episode off, I'd like to tell you a little story. See, I have a friend. Let's call her Mary. So Mary is from Ecuador, and she went to live in the States. She left, and now she's studying over there, and she's been studying medicine. She's studying to become a doctor. Recently, Mary got married, redundancy, she got married, and she got married to, let's just call him Alex, an American. Congratulations, by the way. So they got married, and now they're living together, of course, and she's still continuing her studies. Everything is fine. And recently, Mary went to go watch a movie. She went to go check out a movie with her husband, with Alex. They went to go watch the movie, and apparently this film was a film where there were a lot of murders, a lot of killings, a lot of people who passed away. Not a funny thing, just I laugh because there's a lot of ways to say this and I'm not sure which is the right one. And it seems to be geared towards teaching some kind of message, some kind of lesson about a situation similar to that. My friend, Mary, she felt very bad about it. She, felt some way about it. She cried. She didn't feel great, like in the sense that it made her feel something. But when she talked to her husband about it, super excited to tell him, oh, how do you feel about it? He was just kind of like, whatever. And she was actually pretty surprised about that because obviously it was something that, it hit her. It affected her. It touched the part of her heart. So she told me about it, and of course we had a conversation. And there's an important thing to note about Mary's husband, Alex. The fact that Alex, aside from being American, he's also a soldier. He's in the military. So when you look at it that way, and I explained to her, maybe he was trained, and she understood this too, maybe he was trained and he just understands that there are worse things that can happen in life. So he didn't feel anything about the situation. And it's understandable thinking about what people in the military, even if they don't do it at the moment where they're training, what they might eventually have to do and what they're trained psychologically to be prepared to do. And the things they're prepared to lose, and of course the things they're prepared to gain. So, of course, when we talked about this, we came to the realization that, yeah, of course, this is Alex. And we understand he's a military person, and we can't really say anything about that because, maybe he has a different mindset. But when we talked about it, we also had a little bit of a conversation because even though Alex is a military person, I'm not going to say that people don't feel anything just because they're part of the military or because they have expertise with weapons, expertise with killing, expertise with anything that involves the taking of human lives or the understanding that human lives will be lost. No matter what, even if Alex is a military person, he might feel something. And vice versa, even if my friend Mary, if she weren't a normal person just studying for medicine, studying to become a doctor, she might not feel something. Honestly, people are built differently. They're raised differently. So this leads to a bit of a conversation that I had. And with not just with her, but I guess you could say with friends, with people in my comments section, a conversation that I have generally. And a little bit of something that I've been seeing a lot, at least in my comments section, and also that I've been seeing a lot in life in general, is the way people value or perceive life. Basically going into the idea that sometimes people put a lot of value into 100 lives that are lost over 2 lives that are lost. And that's not to say that vice versa, 2 lives are more important than 100 lives. But I don't try to give weight to either of those situations because what we're talking about is lives in general. So I saw an interesting comment in my last YouTube video where I came to the acceptance of Ecuador's reality And I made a comment about that, about how there's a lot of people who are here have this comment where they say, oh, you lost 2 lives, the assassination attempts, the things that happen in Ecuador aren't a big deal because over here, in my country, most of the time the United States, we lose 100 people to these mass shootings, to these school shootings, to these shootings in general. So, of course, I put myself in their position, and I understand how terrible it can be to look at it that way. And I agree that it's okay. It's really bad that there's 100 people dying over there, and yeah, if you compare it to the 2 over here, it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But it just has always seemed crazy to me and pretty weird still. Like even if I can understand it because I'm putting myself in their position, it still feels weird to me to just accept that, oh, 100, so we don't have to worry about 2. So let me read you the comment that I received in my video so that you realize it's not just me who thinks this way. There's also people even from the States itself that feel that it's a bit of a crazy comparison. And there's a term here that's very important. So I agree in terms of what you are saying regarding 2 deaths versus 100. The thing is, over here in the States, we have sadly become somewhat desensitized to the number of mass shootings that occur now on a weekly basis. It's become like an everyday occurrence. For us here in the US, 2 deaths seem morbidly, surprisingly low compared to the number of deaths that we see reported in the news each day. So for us, going over there, obviously referring to Ecuador, and hearing of these killings, while it is tragic and horrible, we may not be as outraged as a person living in Ecuador seeing what is happening. So as you could see or hear from that comment, there's a key word that really stands out there. And it is the word desensitized. And honestly, I had never used that word before, but I had a pretty good idea of what it meant. But to give you a precise definition, having been made less likely to feel shock or distress at scenes of cruelty or suffering by overexposure to such images. In other words, having been made less sensitive. So that is something that I've been seeing or I've been noticing from a lot of the comments that I receive in that regard. Because it's not just that comment that, well, they actually noticed that people do make those comments a lot, but in normal conversations with people who come from the United States, you do hear that a lot. But there's another comment that I'd like you to hear. Ecuadorians and expats have also become desensitized. Ecuador's current murder rate is 40 at the moment, and a shocking 7,200 murders are expected in this small country until the end of the year. So, while I'm not 100% sure, that was a reply to the previous comment, I'm not 100% sure why they mentioned it in that way, just pretty much pointing out, because it does seem like they understand the severity of how many people are dying in the country. What does stand out is the fact that they do come to the realization, or they accept the fact that Ecuadorians and expats are also desensitized. So it's not just Americans who have lived all their life in the United States and are just now coming here, but Ecuadorians and expats who are living here as well. Here in Ecuador, people are kind of desensitized in different ways. For example, how people of the upper class view people of the lower class. Basically, when you think about how business owners treat lower class employees because they know that they can get away with it, with, lower salaries or hiring people who don't deserve higher positions of power, even though there are people who are very much qualified, even though they're lower class, but they won't hire them because they're not friends or family, and they clearly don't understand the situation that they're in and the situation that they're trying to escape. You could even say that there's the desensitization of people here in Ecuador when it comes to the problems in the United States. Because here, a typical defense, and I guess it kind of makes sense to the racism that some Latin Americans face, because it's not just in Ecuador, it's in Latin America, is using the school shootings as a defense. Basically, you can say whatever you want about Latin Americans cutting grass, fixing roofs, the typical stuff you would hear about Latin Americans, but Latin Americans will fight back by saying, at least we don't have school shootings, or they'll actually call people somehow school shootings, whatever you would like to pronounce that or call that as, but that's what people will say, clearly undermining how heavy it is to say something like that, because you shouldn't joke around about the lives of various children being lost. There is also the situation that I've noticed in Spanish-speaking countries, and I'm not sure why it's just Spanish-speaking countries, it just seems to be that way, but where I see the problem with race, where people don't really take race issues very seriously. For example, with the recent movie, The Little Mermaid, there were a lot, and I mean a lot, of critiques on that movie from Latin Americans, and it was just because the actress wasn't the skin color they wanted her to be. And I'm not sure, that's why I don't really like using this as an example, if it's just because they want to stay true to the story or if it's because there's a race issue here, but it does seem kind of weird that it is only the Spanish-speaking countries that I've seen. Maybe there are more, but these are the ones that I've seen that seem to have an issue with the actress being of a different skin color than she originally was in the animated series. And it's not just the United States and Ecuador that seem to have this problem with being desensitized. You can look at the situation with abortion, and you'll notice that there's two sides. There's pro-abortion and pro-life. People who are pro-life clearly don't care about the situation of the pregnant person, the pregnant mother, who might have gone through a terrible situation in her life, and that's why she's actually pregnant. And then there's the people who are pro-abortion, who pro-life will argue at least, don't care about the life of the child that's being formed inside of the person. And I understand that there's more to it, but there's two sides to this argument. And neither side will accept the other because they just don't understand, or they don't want to reach a point of understanding that their beliefs will not align. And that's the situation with beliefs and ideals. And it's the fact that if you have a belief or ideal that just doesn't match with someone else's, then there will be people who will find a way to attack it, no matter what. And aside from the very obvious fact that people are becoming very cold with this whole desensitization situation, I can't believe that rhymed, we're affecting someone who we really shouldn't be affecting with these kinds of problems. And that is children. Because if you think about it, children are not only the beginning, but the end, and once again the beginning of how this whole situation is just moving forward. Because just think about it. You have a child who at one point is going to become an adult. And if the child learned these things, then of course they're going to teach their children these things. And it's just going to be an endless cycle. So are children to blame for this? No, of course not. Even the 6-year-old child with an acute disability who shot his teacher at the beginning of this year can't really be to blamed for what happened, because if you think about it, what business did the parents of this child having a gun and apparently knowing that this child might be a danger, having that gun and letting the child somehow get access to that gun? No matter how many safety precautions they might have put into place, there was no reason to have a gun in that household. So then who's to blame for this? I'm guessing based on what you just heard, you might want to blame the parents. Since, like I said, children are the beginning and the end of this whole situation, and eventually, in their life cycle, they do become parents. But before we blame the parents, I'd like to take a look at the internet, and then we can blame the parents. So the situation with the internet is how open it is to everyone and how many things you can find on the internet. The internet is home to many great things. Sites where you can find information, sites where you can find news, sites where you can explore the world. Heck, a site where you can listen to this podcast episode that you're listening to right now. But the internet isn't all good things. It's also bad things, such as dangerous websites where you can find places to purchase guns. Maybe you can find places to meet up with strangers that aren't always the best. Places where you can learn things or find out about things that you otherwise wouldn't have known about, and now that you know them, or now that the kid might know them, now they're more keen on wanting to do something about those things. And I'm sure with that last comment, there are going to be people who are going to turn their attention straight towards video games, because a place where you can see actions and things that you might emulate that are bad, video games, right? But if we're going to throw blame on video games, then I think we'd have to analyze movies as well, because you can also see things in a very non-fictional setting in some movies in case, and we can see that they're doing things that people probably wouldn't do in real life. Same thing as in video games, we can see these things and people wouldn't do them in real life. And we can assume that children or adults would want to emulate them, right? I think you get where I'm going with this, but I don't think it makes sense to just completely blame video games, or in this case also completely blame movies, because I really don't think the same way there are video games that show gun violence and movies that show gun violence, that there are people out there trying to get bit by radioactive spiders and obtain spider-related superpowers, movie or video game. So we can't completely blame video games and movies for children's behavior. And some people might also argue that if it's not the video game itself, but the people that they meet in the video game, that might lead them towards something online, going back into the internet. And I'd have to argue that a lot of good, positive relationships have been made online as well, not just the negative ones. Social media, while it is very bad in some ways, it is also very good in others. Do I think there's too much of it out in the world and that people use it too much? Definitely, undoubtedly, unquestionably, yes. It is just insane the amount of time that people spend time on social media and the internet as a whole. And while we're on the topic of social media and the internet, what about sites like TikTok, YouTube, places where you can post videos? Still, in some way, social media, but these are also video sites, which could also show things that are not exactly PG-13 or child-friendly. And here, there's a little bit of something that we do have to talk about, because there is this whole situation of how culture is moving, or has moved, or it is, in this situation where people follow a lot of what is influencers. Social media influencers, YouTube influencers, any place influencers. And the thing about influencers and how I view them is kind of confusing to myself, in fact, because when I think of an influencer, I think of someone who influences, but in a positive way. And it's so weird to me, the people who have become influencers nowadays, because they promote negative things. Recently, in a video that I saw by a YouTuber called Moist Critical, his name is Charlie, but his YouTube name is Moist Critical. I think it's actually Penguin, but people know him as Moist Critical. I watched some of his videos, I checked them out, and one of the things that he recently talked about is this situation of a little girl who made a prank call to the police, saying that her friend was being kidnapped. And as most people would know, and something that I learned about from that video, I did think it was a crime, but I didn't know how serious it was. That is a crime. And the little girl actually got punished for it. And the reason why this little girl did this prank, is because she justified it because she saw it on YouTube. She saw that a YouTube personality, an influencer, did this prank. So what am I trying to say here? The fact that kids, people in general, they see that these YouTubers, these personalities online, do these things. And of course, some of them, I'm not sure if it's for popularity or because they thought it was funny. Some of them I do know it's for popularity. For instance, the situation with TikTok I don't know if I should call it a prank. It wasn't a prank, more like a stunt, which is basically where people were getting on a boat, trying to jump onto another moving boat, not realizing that that could kill you. And some people have already died from that. And it seems silly because they're doing it for clout. They're doing it for attention. They're doing it because they want to be TikTok famous. And where exactly does that get you? In some cases, of course, you can justify, you can talk about how some people become famous and then they get money from it. But you're risking your life for something that just doesn't make sense. And going back to the little girl, she got punished for it, which I'm actually pretty surprised she did, because a lot of the times it feels like in current nowadays society, children aren't punished for the things that they do. They get something equivalent to a slap on the wrist, and sometimes not even that. Just don't do that again, and it's over. And this girl being punished is going to teach her a lesson to not do these things in the future. Because that's what people need. They need to understand that actions have consequences and that you can't just do them. And I know I'm going very far into the situation with being desensitized, but there's a lot of things that we need to understand in order for me to make my point. Because now that we understand the situation with the little girl and how the internet is having an influence on children, we go back now to blaming the parents. Because how are children getting access to these sites? How are children watching these things and seemingly no one does anything about it? Because something important that Moist Critical, Charlie, mentioned in his video is that parents are just sitting there waiting for the internet to teach their children how to be responsible human beings. The people, the parents, I know they're busy. I get that they're busy. But they just seem to not give their children enough importance, or maybe they don't have the ability to give them enough importance because they're busy working, trying to give their children a better life financially, economically, but it just doesn't work that way. Because a child who is unhappy, and as a teacher I can say this, a child who is unhappy and does not have the presence of their parents, they do not perform the same in life as children who do. And their behavior says a lot about their situation at home. I think a lot of parents really don't understand how important it is for them to be an active member of a child's life, an active member of their family's life. Because when someone is missing, then the family starts to fall apart. And when the family starts to fall apart, then everyone is affected. And this leads into another situation that is also at fault. And it is the lack of awareness or attention into what is mental health. Because clearly, if there were more of an emphasis on mental health, on seeing how children are being brought up and how they're feeling in the process of being brought up, and the same thing with adults, them taking more of a healthy approach into psychology and being treated by psychologists and seeing what the situation is in their lives, then there would be a completely different world out there, because people would actually be taking care of themselves and actually focusing on the important things in life and not getting distracted into other things. They would actually view life the way it should be viewed, where lives matter, where people matter, where if someone dies, even if it's one person, not just because they're my family or they're not my family, I'm going to care or not care, but because they're a living human being, that they're going to care about this person, and that we're going to see that a crime doesn't just have to be looked at, oh, yeah, someone killed 2 people, not a big deal. 100 people dying because of this criminal is worse. They're gonna look at every crime and see that we need to do something about this, and not just brush it off like it's not my problem. So in the end, who's to blame, and what can we do about it? Is it the parents who have children, or the actual children who begin the whole cycle and eventually become parents? Is it the internet that is teaching the children wrong? Is it the parents again who are letting their children do whatever they want on the internet without proper guidance or without actually being an active member of the children's lives? Is it a lack of awareness or attention on mental health? Well, if I had to say what the problem is here, I wouldn't attribute it to any of these one things. If I had to say what the actual problem is, I think the problem is ourselves. And I know that's gonna sound weird because I know a lot of people who are watching or listening to this might say, but Ace, I'm not like that. Ace, I care about my children. Or Ace, I don't let them be on the internet. Or Ace, the internet is worse. Or Ace, what about mental health? But see, the problem is that a lot of the times when there's a problem with anything in life, we don't look at how it affects other people. We look at how it affects ourselves. So we only take it into consideration and we only worry about it when it actually becomes a problem that affects us. And I get that's a very safe way of thinking in life because you can't worry about everything. There's no humane way for you to look at everything that's happening in life and worry about it. I know because I've tried. I actually had a very long part of my life where I was just worried about everyone and everything that was around me. I saw people out on the streets and I just didn't know how to help them because I didn't have the money to help them. Now I'm here on YouTube and I'm trying to help everyone live their best life when they come to Ecuador or when they just live life, because this episode isn't just about Ecuador. This episode is about understanding, being desensitized, understanding what the problem is and understanding how to solve it, because we can be better. We can learn from the things that are happening around us. And another key part is like what my dad always says. You have to put yourself in the other person's position. This is very similar to the golden rule, which I've respected my whole life, which is don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. Like, I find it so weird that whenever I talk about a situation, a bad situation, there'll be people, and it's not just expats, Americans, foreigners, but even Ecuadorians, where you tell them something bad that's happened, and somehow it becomes this competition, like something to me happened that was worse. Like, okay, I will understand your pain, but did we really have to compare? Like, why are we measuring our things against each other? And I know that sounded weird, so take it as you will, but it's just so weird. It's just so wrong to me that we're out here trying to find a way to justify our problems as the worst problem, instead of trying to find a solution to these problems and understanding that no matter how small, no matter how one death compares to 100, that they're both still deaths. So with the world becoming desensitized more and more each day, with more social media showing more horrible things happening in the world, with more real life horrible things happening, with more children being exposed to horrible things, with more adults who don't seem to understand that they need to form a part of their children's life, with influencers seeming to do things just because they think it makes them popular and not understanding the massive effect that they're having on people. We really need, as a solution that I think would be ideal, to understand how our actions have consequences not only for ourselves, but for the people around us. How what we do, how we act, how the fact that we're not treating someone well just because they're not us or they're not our family is affecting the world. Because the more we treat people like that, the more we behave this way, the more we normalize this behavior, the more we come to accept it, and the less sensitive we become to it. And eventually, we're gonna reach the point where things like the Thanos snap, which was a meme, a joke of getting rid of half the population, which I understand why they say it with how populated the world is, but that's not the solution. But we're gonna come to the point where we feel that a Thanos snap, which used to be a joke, is actually gonna be a serious thing. Where we're gonna be like, you know, that's not such a bad idea. It's not me. If it's them, cool, let's get rid of half the population. There are going to be people who at some point, if they don't already, believe that that is going to be the ideal thing. And it's not the ideal thing. We need to do better, and we can. But as with all things in life, I have no way to force you to do something that you don't want to do. Remember, you live your life the way you see fit. I just hope that you realize that if you keep living life that way, that people are gonna keep becoming less sensitive to the things that are happening, and we're just gonna keep getting these comparisons where 100 lives is not gonna be the same as 2 lives, where 1 life is not gonna be the same as 5, because the numbers really don't matter. Like I said before, lives are lives, and all lives matter. And I really hope this has helped in some way, shape, or form, because while it wasn't completely about Ecuador, there was some Ecuador influence to it. We're not just here to talk about Ecuador, but we're also here to talk about a little bit more, to see if we can help the world motivate change, maybe do things a little bit differently. And if in some way this has taught you something, well, I'm very happy about that, because I've always wanted to try to make a difference and help others in some way, shape, or form. While I know I can't do it in the way that people like Mr. Beast do it, at least maybe just talking about a little bit of my own opinions, my own viewpoints, the things that I've seen while living my life, maybe I can change the world. So stay tuned for future podcast episodes where we will be talking about other stuff about Ecuador, or maybe a little more things. And make sure you take care, get plenty of rest, try to understand the rest of the world. Not everyone is the same. And as always, ace out.